Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Ready to Export, Now What? Presented by the Florida SBDC at UCF, U.S. Small Business Administration, and EXIM Bank. My name is Christopher Bogstad, and I'm an associate consultant at the Florida SBDC, and I'll be hosting the webinar today along with our presenters. We would like to thank Orange County for kindly sponsoring this webinar. Now, before we get started, I'd like to give a brief overview about the SBDC. Could you advance the slide still? The SBDC, or Small Business Development Center, is an economic development organization that exists to help small businesses grow and succeed, and we serve an 8-county region. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and are partially funded by the US SBA, State of Florida, and other local support organizations and community partners. The SBDC has been around for 45 years, and we have offices throughout Florida, ranging from our headquarters in Pensacola all the way to the Keys, with each region being hosted by a university or state college. In Central Florida, we are hosted by UCF. Our service offerings include no-cost one-on-one consulting in all different areas of business, and normally in-person, but now virtual seminars on various business topics and strategies. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping rules. So your mics are muted by default, but if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions chat box feature in the GoToWebinar panel at any time, and we'll address them towards the end of the presentation. And also, please don't use the raise hand feature. Again, just use the questions box. Copies of today's presentation can be found under the handouts tab on the GoToWebinar panel. And evaluation surveys for this webinar will be emailed to you shortly after the session. So please check your inbox at the conclusion and submit your feedback as soon as you can so we can improve our future offerings. Now, before I pass it over to Jill, I would like to give a brief introduction of today's presenters. Jill McLaughlin is a certified global business professional and an international trade specialist with the Florida SBDC at UCF, helping Florida small businesses grow their international sales. She's also a program manager for our export marketing plan service. Rafael Pratts is also a certified global certified business professional and an international trade specialist with the Florida SBDC at UCF, with extensive international experience to share with our Florida exporters. Rafael is also the area manager of our Florida SBDC at UCF office serving the Osceola County. Sandro Murtas is the lead export finance manager for the U.S. Small Business Administration, Office of International Trade, covering Florida, Puerto Rico, and U.S. Virgin Islands. Sandro is a wonderful resource to Florida small businesses looking to finance their export transaction, and is here today to share with us some of SBA's attractive export financing solutions for U.S. small businesses. And then Elena Méndez is the regional director with EXIM Bank in the Eastern Region Small Business Group, and works with U.S. exporters in the state of Florida. EXIM Bank's mission is to create and sustain U.S. jobs by increasing U.S. exports. Elena joined us to share EXIM's U.S. exporter programs with trade finance products that are providing financial support to ensure a level playing field for U.S. companies competing abroad. And with that, I will turn it over to Jill.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christopher. And thank you all for joining us this morning for this webinar. We have a great and packed agenda, so I'm excited to get started. What we're going to talk about today is you've all decided that you want to expand into international markets. And we're going to talk about how to go about finding the foreign markets to target for your company. And then once you've identified those, we're going to discuss the different market entry strategies and the costs and benefits of each of those different strategies. And then, of course, the question is, how am I going to find my customers in those markets? So we're going to provide you some information on resources and tools to help you identify customers. And then you just heard from Christopher. We're thrilled to have Sandro Murtas from the SBA and Elena Méndez from EXIM Bank to talk about export solutions to support the growth of your business through this international expansion plan, as well as some financial tools to help you mitigate risk. And then we're going to talk about next steps. and the resources to help you implement your plans. And I'm so thrilled that you're all here today and interested in expanding your business into international markets, because it is a huge opportunity with 95% of the world's customers located beyond US borders. We also know that companies that are exporting on average grow faster, are more profitable, and are just a stronger business because you have more diversification in your customer base, so you'll have an easier time riding out fluctuations in the US economy, as well as if your business is seasonal, for example. Exporting can help you eliminate those fluctuations in your business. The US is known for high quality products and services, and are demanded throughout the world. Your competitors are out there gaining market shares, and really the opportunity is out there for you to gain market share too. So before we go further, we have a couple of poll questions that I wanted to pose to the audience. So Christopher, would you mind posting those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first poll that we have is a true or false question, and that reads as follows. Florida accounts for 1/5 of the total US trade with Latin America and the Caribbean. So please go ahead and submit your answer. I'll have this open for a couple of seconds.
Florida accounts for 1/5 of total US trade with Latin America and the Caribbean.
So here is the results. 67% said yes, and 33% said false.
Well, the answer is actually false. Florida accounts for 1/3 of US trade with Latin America and the Caribbean, 1/3. And that's due to Florida's, very strategic geographic location. We have a great infrastructure and workforce, a lot of trade support and expertise. And here's an interesting fact. There are more direct flights from Florida to Latin America and Caribbean cities coming from Florida than from the rest of the United States combined. So a lot of opportunities are being taken advantage of from Florida companies. I think we have one more question, Christopher.
Yes, and this is also a true or false question, and it reads as follows. Florida is home to 1 in 5 US exporters. Please go ahead and submit your answer, and I'll have this open for a couple of more seconds.
1 in 5. 1 in 5 total US exporters.
Okay, I will go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we have 64% said true and 36% said false.
And the answer is in fact true. Florida does account for 1 in 5 total US exporters. The Florida companies are exporting goods and services in excess of $100 billion. But also want to point out to everyone, these exporters are not just big companies. 97% of US exporters are small, medium-sized businesses. So exporting is not just for big business. So thanks, Christopher. And also always like to talk to companies about being ready to export. The number one factor that I see as success in companies being successful in their international expansion plan is management's commitment. Exporting is not a long-term strategy. I'm sorry, it's not a short-term strategy, it is a long-term strategy. And so management really needs to be committed in the long run to this growth plan. So what that means is management needs to be committing time and resources of the business to this growth plan. The other thing that is important is that your international customers are going to be doing their due diligence on you. So having a product or service that has been proven successful in the domestic market is quite beneficial when you're trying to market yourself overseas. The other thing you want to make sure is that you have sufficient production capacity. If you've gone through the effort of finding that customer overseas and they place that big order, you want to be able to fulfill that, so increase your capacity. And then, do you have a plan? You know, the old saying goes, companies don't plan to fail, but fail to plan. So want to make sure that you have a very well thought out plan in growing this part of your business. And that's why we're all here today, is to help you in developing that plan and providing you the resources to help you do that. So you've decided you want to expand in international markets, and then the question is, where should I target to sell my product or service? I meet a lot of companies that are eager to expand into international markets, and they tell me they have chosen a selected market, and I'll ask them, how did they choose that market? And sometimes they tell me, well, I have a personal connection to that market, or you know, someone found me on the internet from that market, or I read something in the news, and so you know, that's why I chose it. And my response to that is, those all might be good leads to consider. But as we talked about earlier, investing in this new growth strategy is a long-term strategy and will require a lot of time and resources of your business. And we know that time and resources are a scarcity in a small business. So we want to make sure that you're doing it in a very methodical and education way to make sure that you're selecting the markets that offer your business the greatest return on investment. So how should you do that? Well, I would say market research is really the foundation to provide you the information that you need to select the markets that offer you the best opportunity. So you really need to do your homework through market research to see, for example, which markets are the fastest growing? What are the trends and outlooks in my industry in these markets? There is a plethora of resources and information available to you right from your computer, many of which are free, and I listed a couple here on this website. You can find out information, for example, you can look at trade data. You can see products just like yours that are being exported to countries all around the world. So you can see which countries are importing a lot of products just like mine, which ones are growing faster. You can also look at economic data, demographic statistics, as well as various industry statistics of what's going on in markets all around the world that can be indicators of demand for your product or service in those markets. So we're going to talk more at the end of this presentation in the resource section to give you some more information on how to access some of this data, but did want you to know that there is a lot out there for you to come up with this foreign market identification. So just thought I'd throw out there a little case study of a company, Sales Surfboard. So all of you attendees that have joined us today, this is your company. You sell cutting-edge fiberglass surfboards, and you are looking to international markets to start selling and exporting your surfboards to. So I'm going to ask you all, what is some data, what is some information that might help you identify the best market for you, Sal, to start selling your surfboards? So if you would, everyone, if you could just put in the chat feature, just throw out there any ideas of data that you would like to see to start identifying markets for your product. So again, anything, just throw in the chat feature. And Christopher, if you see anything come across, if you could just shout it out, or any ideas that you might have for Sal to help Sal identify different markets to start exporting his surfboards to.
Yes, so I think One idea, for example, would be to look at trade data.
So what kind of trade data would you be looking for, Christopher?
For example, trade data for exports of a product, the volume. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, exactly. Any other ideas out there? We have a quiet crowd. Everyone's still drinking their coffee. So here we go. Here's some more information that I would suggest to Sal to start looking at and figuring out which markets might be a great target to start exporting his surfboard. So as Christopher said, you can get access to global trade data for surfboards. So you can look to see how much of each country is importing of this product and how much of that is coming from the United States. So that can tell us an affinity for U.S. goods in that market. We can also look at the growth rate. So we can see these countries that are importing products just like yours and find out how has that grown over the last 5-10 years. We can also look at complementary goods. So let's see which countries are importing a lot of wetsuits. If they're importing a lot of wetsuits, then they might be interested in surfboards too. You could look at different statistics like coastline length, which countries have the longest coastline, or number of surf shops in the country. There's a lot of economic data out there as well. GDP, population, thinking about the demographics of your customer base and then looking for those demographics in countries around the world. You can look at various different risk measures that are provided by a number of different organizations that can help you assess the risk of doing business in that country. And we can also look at duties and taxes. I know one question that many companies have is, what is it going to cost me to export my product to these countries? Can I be competitive? Looking at free trade agreements. Free trade agreements enable you as companies to export with fewer trade barriers, and again, can be an indicator of demand for U.S. products. So again, a number of statistics are out there and information to help you identify and be very educated in your decision when you're investing in this growth strategy to support your success and a return on that investment of going into international markets. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Rafael, who's going to talk about different market entry strategies that you can consider, as well as different tools available to you to identify potential customers. But before we turn it over to Rafael, I think we're going to pose a geography question, Christopher, if we can put that on the screen.
Yes, we have one more, Paul, and the question reads as follows: which country has the longest coastline in the world? The options of which are United States, Canada, Russia, and Norway. So I will give this a couple of seconds. See, the answers are rolling in now. So submit your answers and I will close it shortly. Okay, closing it now. Let's see here. So we have 43% answered the United States. 43%, the tie with United States, answered Canada. 7% answered Russia and 7% answered Norway. And the correct answer is actually Canada.
Excellent. Christopher, if any of you have noticed, his accent is from Norway, so he had to throw that question in, or that option in, but Norway does actually have an extensive coastline. So thank you, Christopher. Rafael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jill, for covering that information. So obviously, Jill talked a little bit about obviously the market intelligence side, right? Collecting data, putting all that together. But now is more the action side, more or less how to identify kind of top foreign markets. Once you identify a particular market, then when you're thinking about the market entry, there are things to consider, obviously. It could be financial, maybe internal resources that you need to kind of dedicate to your export process. The type of product, maybe you have 5, but you think out of those 5, maybe one has a really good chance that you don't need to adapt and change so much or modify your product to introduce it into a foreign market. So just because you have several products doesn't mean necessarily you're going to be exporting all of them at one time. Sometimes you kind of play by ear and kind of figure out which one has the most success rate that you identify with. Also, the business condition of a particular target market also has a play into that equation as well, as far as trying to identify the right market entry strategy. Definitely, as you're aware, also government regulations, they do play a key role into that. Some of the countries might require for you to have a particular agent, local agent, in order to do business in a particular country. Also understanding the economics, the political, the cultural, the environmental, and even the industry specific as far as your particular industry, any regulations that are taking place. Those are good things to keep in mind as far as when you are trying to kind of hovering and understanding a particular country. So, whoops, my bad. Let's see, I think I went a little bit too far out. Yeah, before we go here, now before I go here into this slide, also things to consider when you're going into a market. There's different ways you could go about it. You could go indirectly or you could go directly. But before you do that, you also have to kind of understand the levels of resources that you might have to invest into this venture. The risk tolerance that you have, maybe the opportunity cost, the nature of your products or services, or the control that you're willing to relinquish in dealing with customers or users of your goods. And with that said, there's a great tool by International Trade Administration, Department of Commerce, that I just wanted to kind of throw it out there. You probably want to jot it down so you can play around with it. It's under beta, but it's a great resource. And the only thing you need is a couple of things. Your NAICS code, your zip code where you do business, and then pretty much it will tell you kind of, it starts identifying some foreign markets. It's called tool, it's Market Diversification Tool. Again, it's under the ITA, International Trade Administration, Department of Commerce. You simply, you can Google that, and definitely you can find that information online. So it's a great resource for you to kind of consider. Now, when you're thinking about selling indirectly, or what they call indirect selling, pretty much you're turning over your export activities to a third party. These individuals may assume responsibility for finding buyers overseas, shipping and getting paid. However, they also be working with a variety of companies too. So their focus is not be exclusively on your product. Also using online marketplaces such as Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, or even payback of companies that are selling products or as a complementary product to his own, like Jill was mentioning, maybe a company that was selling the bodysuits. Maybe that will be a good company for Sal to consider. Now, suitable partners may be manufacturers of those products and are enhanced by your products or sold the same as the customer base. So just kind of be mindful of that. Also, indirect selling requires fewer resources, maybe faster to market, maybe a lower risk, but you may lose some control with the marketing of the product that you get a little. Now, talking a little bit about direct selling. One of the things about indirect selling as well is that sometimes you lose out on what customers are telling about your products as well. Direct selling, on the other hand, it might be a little bit more a way to maximize your profits, tends to be more long-term growth. It tends to be a little bit more lucrative. You tend to be a little bit closer to your relationships as far as your international buyers. You tend to learn a little bit about the competitiveness and also how to maximize international potential. Some of them could be dealt with particular representatives, distributors, or agents. So you have to kind of also be mindful as far as the type of distributor agreements that you might have, maybe defining territories that you might be thinking of, and also the support that you're going to be providing them as far as sales and marketing for their efforts. You could also, a great way to use that is you could also sell through your website to maybe foreign retailers as well. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide, but also kind of be mindful that U.S. Commercial Service offers great resources and insights to help you strategize and explore different market entry strategies and assist with identifying and vetting potential partners, which we will talk about in the next slide over. Okay, so let me just kind of go to the next slide. And there's this section here, business matchmaking services. Obviously, when we talk about business matchmaking services, you know, finding a good, viable, reliable partner takes time and effort. And basically, you want to make sure that you put there's some great organizations that can help you that, like U.S. Ecommerce department. Definitely connecting with companies that they bring pre-screens is very important, I think beneficial to companies to consider. So there are different services they offer, whether it be the Gold Key service, international partner search, also international partner research with virtual introductions that was kind of introduced kind of post-COVID. The great tools, but the idea behind all this is definitely for you to kind of get opportunities to get connected with potential buyers in the marketplace. And obviously, they do set up appointments with potential partners. They help you with travel and arrangements. So it's a great tool to consider. Also, Enterprise Florida has something similar to it. I'm not going to go into details, but also they also offer business matchmaking services as well for you to kind of consider. So both U.S. Commercial Service and Enterprise Florida offer you the opportunity for them to help you connect with foreign markets. But this is the catch. You have to understand what particular markets you want to cater to. So obviously, there's a lot of countries. For example, let's just say that Europe is a market that you're thinking about, which top maybe 2 or 3 countries might be more suitable for you to kind of consider. Maybe pay attention to particular trade shows happening in around Europe, just get a sense as far as, because usually those buyers tend to go to those big trade shows that take place in the marketplace. Let me see if I could go move to the next slide. Oops. I went too far. Very sensitive clicker here. But anyways, the next one here. So as you're probably more familiar with, there's different type of trade shows, right? So now we have the kind of the physical trade show, and pay attention to traffic, especially traffic to those to those trade shows, not only in one particular year, but as a kind of a trend. Are they getting more traffic per year, less traffic per year? Are buyers going to a particular show? So pay attention to shows. Sometimes shows are kind of they're done in a way that if you're going to Asia, they might have a textile show in, let's say, in Japan, and a week later they're gonna jump over and they're gonna go to South Korea. So pay attention to, for you, might be great, because then you could just simply go from one country to another instead of going all the way back home. You kind of see 2 different shows in one shot. So it kind of makes it more doable for you to get more kind of a good kind of a return your investment as far as that. Virtual trade shows is something that's happening. A lot of people that I talk to is another great tool to consider. If you're able to do both, that's great. But a lot of people love, especially to meet people. Remember, people love to do business with people. They get an opportunity to see people face to face. That definitely is something worthwhile. If you're considering a particular trade show, not necessarily you need to exhibit at a trade show. It probably is a higher investment in dollar cost. But minimum, I would encourage you to consider maybe at least walk the show, see how it goes, and then if you think that might have some potential, look around and see if maybe the U.S. Commercial Service or even Enterprise Florida have their own kind of delegation or booth for you to consider that moving forward in the future. And the last section that I would like to cover is e-commerce. Now, obviously, e-commerce is a big topic to consider or to talk about in a very short amount of time. But I just want to give you some tidbits, things for you to kind of consider as you explore how to best kind of manage your online presence with your website. And so obviously it's all about creating a global digital strategy, right? So basically you need to kind of understand what are some of the objectives as far as that you're trying to accomplish with your website. Now, as you think about doing business global, whether it be language considerations, also the strategy behind it, one of the key components, obviously, as far as your website or your online presence is search engines, right? How to get found online, but also how your website is or your content is mobile friendly. Also pay attention to that as well. Now, there's some other great resources that I would like to bring to your attention. And as far as examining where you are now, and again, it's also by the U.S. Department of Commerce, the International Trade Administration Office, and it's called the Website Globalization Review, and they consider the gap analysis. So it's a great tool, kind of help. It's a tool that they offer to their clients that it helps them kind of identify where are they now as far as what changes they need to make in order to get their website more optimized to find foreign buyers. So it's a great tool for you to kind of be aware of. Again, the name of the tool is a Website Globalization Review, and it's a great tool for you to kind of understand that obviously having a website is important, but then having a website that is relevant to international market is probably equally as important, and then to be found in different marketplaces. So when we talk about getting a global exposure to customers around the world, we also are talking about the e-commerce sales channels, right? So whether you're talking about the website, which is hopefully your bread and butter, but also online global marketplaces, that's very important. Where you're thinking about global marketplaces, maybe like Amazon, that tends to be a very popular one, or Alibaba, maybe through social media campaigns that you're putting together, or even selling through third-party in-country distributors. So the idea here is that obviously strategically you could say, hey, you know what, you may be exploring different options, but your strategy into going to different markets might be a little bit different. The way you do business heading into Canada might be a little bit different than maybe trying to shift and do focus on maybe doing business in Dominican Republic or maybe doing business in Taiwan. So based on that, then you're going to kind of find out what are the best tools and maybe platforms in that country that draws your product to be found with that market. So optimizing your content to international customers takes time, right? But the idea here is that you need to, think about the product you're selling. So SEO is very key and important to your endeavor. So a couple of tidbits before I move on and I pass it on to Sandro. Obviously, be clear as far as your message. Using simple language to visitors who might not be English, maybe not their first language. Also, maybe detailed descriptions with a lot of product photos, very important. Also, trying to give exposure to an international prominent on your website, maybe making sure that you make it a little bit personalized, maybe international division, maybe an email of an actual person that is dealing with a business development in foreign markets. Understanding the use of Google Trends, Google Analytics, understanding your website traffic performance, see where you're getting your leads from, your capture form, maybe not requiring so many people to put so much detailed information in order to get a good lead. So there's different things that you could kind of definitely take steps in order to get your business found in international marketplace. But like Jill was mentioning, is a long-term commitment. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's kind of about testing the water. Especially the most important thing is for you to understand what top market do you think you want to be relevant and be found in, and then what particular platforms am I able to going to be used? Is it going to be like a version of your website in a particular country? Is it going to be more about different maybe global marketplaces? Is it going to be through different social media campaigns that are going to be put out there, or maybe different distributors are going to be carrying your product or services in that particular region? So not one answer fits all, but the idea here is that just be understanding, and there's great resources online, and hopefully you found this presentation to be valuable, insightful. And if you need further assistance with this, definitely feel free to reach out to us, and we'll try to help as best as we can. Thank you so much. And with that said, I will pass it on to Sandro from the SBA. I think I will transition over. And here he is. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rafael. Good morning, everybody. I just want to welcome your desire to expand into international markets. I will be talking about the SBA programs that have been created to assist small business exporters access financing through our lending partners, the banks. Just as a reminder, the Small Business Administration is a federal agency that has the mandate to help grow the small business sector of our economy. And we do it basically through what we call the 3 C's. We have federal contracting, in which we want to make sure that small businesses have an opportunity to access contracts from the federal government, which we shouldn't forget that the US government is the biggest buyer in the world. We also do it through counseling with our partners, such as the Small Business Development Center, the Women Business Centers, Veterans Business Opportunity Centers. There are many programs that are out there to assist small businesses, providing access to counselors that have a lot of expertise, such as Jill, Rafael, that can help you with the planning of your business. And also, we do it through access to capital. SBA does not provide direct financing unless there is a disaster, such as we have seen recently with COVID, with Ida, or Hurricane Ida, the fires in the west, on the west side of the country. Otherwise, the way SBA provides access to financing is through the banks. The small business goes to the bank, they apply for a loan, and the bank will determine if they want to do provide the financing, to provide a loan. And if they do, they have to determine if they feel comfortable assuming all the risk. So if they don't, and the applicant is a small business, and when we talk about small businesses, we're talking about we have different sizes depending on the industry. They will require a guarantee from SBA. So you don't actually apply for an SBA loan unless there is a disaster, but you go to your bank, and then the bank will be the applicant for the SBA guarantee. So when we talk about small businesses, how do we define them? Well, we use the North American Industrial Code, where basically we have different sectors, such as manufacturers, and a company that is a manufacturer that has 500 employees or less. Sometimes that number goes up depending on the industry. Is considered a small business. A distributor, 100 employees or less. A service company, depending on the type of services they provide. Sales can go from 7 to 35 million, 0.5. That will be the parameter to be used to determine the size of the business, if they're a small business or not. And then when you have situations where the company is borderline, meaning that it is between a small business and a large business, we can also use what we call the alternative size standard, using some financial parameters to determine if they qualify as a small business or not. So when we talk about an export or an exporter, we're talking about a company that is involved into international transactions in which there is sales to a foreign buyer. The payment is coming from a foreign country. There is probably foreign exchange, international transportation. That is considered an export sale. Now, sometimes we have small businesses that are part of the supply chain of a larger company, meaning that they're selling domestically. They're not involved in foreign exchange, international transportation, because they're selling to somebody within the continental USA or the Puerto Rico, Hawaii. So that's considered a domestic transaction. But if their buyer is re-exporting the product, then that is considered an indirect export. And why is that important? Because they can qualify under the international loan programs that SBA has. So let's get into the details of these programs that are available to banks to provide financing to small businesses. Basically, there are two programs, starting with the international trade loan, which is a term loan that is great to help small businesses become more competitive. For example, improving the cash flow because they can refinance debt, or improving production efficiency by purchasing equipment, or refurbishing their facilities. Or even business acquisition by another company, for example, that is exporting, or providing them permanent working capital to build up inventory. Then there is the Export Express, which is a line of credit. It's a great program for companies that are moving the first steps, because as we will see in the next slides, they can finance expenses that help them open markets in addition to financing export sales. And then there is the Export Working Capital Program, which is a larger line of credit. I'm going to turn off the cam because it seems I'm having some issues with the bandwidth. Then the Export Working Capital Program, which is a larger program that is used for companies, small businesses that are growing their export sales and they need additional working capital. Oops, sorry. Just moved too fast. So we talked about the international trade loan, as I mentioned, term loan, great to assist small businesses becoming more competitive. And it goes up to $5 million, and it has a 90% guarantee for the bank instead of the regular guarantee of 75%. Again, the business must be a small business that is exporting, is an indirect exporter, or is working with some of the partners that are here today, such as the SBDC, Department of Commerce, Central Florida, Enterprise Florida, to grow or start selling internationally. So if they have that in their business plan that is provided to the bank, then we can qualify them for the higher guarantee, which makes the loan more attractive for the lender because they're sharing the risk with SBA. The second program that I mentioned to you was the Export Express. As I mentioned to you, this is a great great program for businesses, small businesses that are starting to export. And this can be issued as a line of credit or as a term loan. It can go up to $500,000, and we provide the bank with a 90% guarantee up to $350,000, and 75% between that amount and $500,000. Again, this can be used by the small business to finance export sales, can be used to fund participation into trade shows, international trade shows, trade missions, invest, for example, on their website, as Rafael mentioned, to promote their products and make international sales through their website. Any expense that will help them to increase their export sales can be financed under the line, and they can still use 30% of the line to finance the domestic business. Also, if the small business receives an advance payment and they have to issue a guarantee to the buyer that if they don't perform, the money will be returned to them, they can use the line to issue standby letters of credit with only a 25% cash collateral. Finally, we have the Export Working Capital Program. This is a larger line designed to help small businesses finance export sales. It will go up to $5 million and it will provide the bank with a 90% guarantee. This is ideal for a small business that has been growing their export sales, and now they're seeing their cash flow strained because they have to fund the domestic sales in addition to the export sales. So they need additional working capital. The bank is not comfortable financing those export sales, assuming all the risk. That's why this line, and SBA will provide a 90% guarantee to the bank in order for the bank to provide the line to the small business. It can be issued to finance purchase orders or contracts, with those many, or maybe the small business is a sporadic exporter. Maybe they do 1 or 2 transactions a year. They can still use the line to finance those. It can also be used to finance export inventory and foreign account receivables, preferably with the EXIM insurance if they qualify for that. And Elena will go over that in the next few minutes. And so the way it works, if it is issued as a transaction based to finance POs or contracts, they can get up to 90% of the value of the purchase order. If they're using an asset-based line of credit, the bank can advance up to 75% against export inventory and 90% up to 90% insured foreign account receivables. So this is a great programs, and it helps, like I said, those small businesses that are very successful in international markets. They're growing their sales. They can go out and become confident that they have the backup of SBA and the bank to make those sales and increase their success and expansion into international markets. Again, the EWCP can also be used to issue standby letters of credit. As I mentioned, they have a large order, they get an advance payment of $100,000. They need to issue a guarantee to the buyer that if they don't perform, the buyer will get his or her money back. So they go to the bank to issue that letter of credit as a guarantee, and the bank is committing itself to make that payment if the small business exporter fails to perform. So if they're committing to make a $100,000 payment, they need to have a cash collateral of $100,000. But if the small business has the line of credit, the EWCP or the Export Express, they only need to put up only 25% cash collateral, and they can use the $75,000 to manufacture or purchase the product or perform the service that is going to be exported. And this is my information. I'll be more than glad to answer any questions. Thank you. And Elena, now from the Export-Import Bank, another sister agency that helps exporters and small business exporters increase their presence and sales in international market, will make a presentation about the programs that EXIM Bank offers.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Today, as Sandro started the conversation, we're going to go into other export solutions for the exporters here in the state of Florida, as well as the US. Okay. For those of you who do not know us, Export-Import Bank of the United States is an independent federal government agency of the US government. We are the official export credit agency of the United States, similar to all those countries which are mostly industrialized countries throughout the world. There's over 120 of us in the world. We are established since 1934, and our mandate and mission is to support US exports in order to create and sustain US jobs. The reason why I point this out is because this is central to all our programs, as well as the requirements of the program, which are basically, we require that the products or services have a minimum US content, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. We have our headquarters in Washington, D.C., with 12 regional offices throughout the nation. I am based in Miami, Florida, and cover the states of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. But there are other colleagues throughout the U.S. Covering the rest of the United States. So we also have working capital guarantee programs similar to what Sandro spoke about, and I will talk about that a little bit. We also have export insurance, export credit insurance, which ensure the shipment of your products in the event of non-payment. And I'll just touch a little bit on foreign buyer financing, which is basically to support the export of US capital goods overseas. Basically, hold on a minute, there we go. Basically, the industries that we cover are very diverse. Anything from manufacturing through agribusiness, and I'd like to specifically mention services. Service providers are considered export services, so it's important to note that anybody who's doing consultation, engineering, legal, any sort of service provider may be able to access our programs. So as we look at the spectrum of export finance, the discussion with Sandro started at the pre-export financing phase, which is working capital or pre-export advances to start producing or purchasing the products needed for export. We have a working capital guarantee program similar to Sandro's with variations, which I'll discuss shortly. But we need to take it all the way to the post-export financing phase. And that's important to note because even if you have working capital for your export activities, if you don't have the cover or the insurance to make sure that the post-export financing aspect of the transaction is secure, you are still required to pay your working capital, even if your buyer does not pay the shipment you made to them. So the default of the buyer is very tangible and very important to a small business because that can make or break the export financing aspect of the transaction. So the working capital guarantee program is also a guarantee we provide to the lender, and the lender on-lends to that exporter. It assists both small and medium-sized companies to obtain that pre-export working capital. We cover 90% of the principal and interest on the loans to the exporters to the lender. It can either be a transaction-specific loan or a revolving line of credit. We do not require any minimums or maximums, but please note that the lender under their credit policies will have a minimum threshold where they will consider the transaction to be viable. So technically, we're seeing that lenders usually like to see amounts between 500,000 above. However, since this is an asset-based lending structure, it is intensive in the work that has to be done from the banker's side. So in this particular case, we usually see that the ideal amount minimum would be $1 million and above. We do not have a cap, so the program allows anything all the way up to $10 million if the exporter is eligible under the credit parameters. So we do suggest that when it's under the million, we probably will revert to the SBA program to allow a better accommodation and a more streamlined process. We also do the advance rates based on eligible inventory and or in accounts receivable, so 75% advance rate for inventory, 90% on insured foreign receivables. Here's an example of a working capital facility with and without EXIM. The traditional working capital facility without any involvement of SBA or even EXIM would typically have advance rates between 20 and 50 and maybe up to 70% depending on the bank's credit policy. But with the working capital facility with EXIM, the advance rates shoot up from 0% to 75%. And in the accounts receivable, as long as it's foreign receivables that are insured, it could be up to 90% depending on the lender's policy again. And for LC-backed accounts receivable, also 90%. So you're looking at more than doubling your access to working capital just by having these programs in place. Now, the export credit insurance program is usually the entry point to most exporters with us, and the importance is multiple. First, you have the risk protection that in the event that your foreign buyers default either due to a commercial event or a political event, that you're covered anywhere between 90 and 95% of the shipment value due to you at time of shipment. And that's really important because it really reduces the risk factor and enables the exporter to offer open account terms where they would otherwise request cash in advance. It also is a marketing tool because you're actually becoming more competitive in the marketplace, enabling the open account credit terms and competing with your peers in that industry to win the bid or the contract. Additionally, it is financial assistance because you're allowing lenders to add those insured foreign receivables and allow them to take the assignment of proceeds of the policy. And in the event of a claim, the lender is able to receive the claim payment and apply it toward your line of credit. What risks are covered under the export credit insurance policy? Pretty much those most common to most exporters, which are commercial risks. In the case of insolvency or bankruptcy of the company overseas, or a protracted default, they simply don't pay you, even though they have received the merchandise and have seemingly had no issues with it. However, it does not cover commercial disputes. Commercial disputes are considered to be between the buyer and the seller, and it should be settled therefore. But it also, more importantly, covers political risks, which include currency transferability or convertibility. If the country shuts down the transfer of funds, even though your customer is willing and able to pay you, they cannot convert the local currency into US dollars, and therefore you're out of the payment. War, revolution, insurrection, obviously those are very important in the current climate, and the cancellation of an import or an export license are also cases where we would cover the claim. Oops, sorry. So the policies that we usually offer U.S. exporters depends on whether or not they're a small business. Small businesses have two particular policies that are eligible for them. The first being the express insurance policy, and those are for new to export companies. 95% cover, no deductible, you pay as you ship on the premiums, and we will allow you to put up to 10 buyers on that policy. Once you grow out of the 10 buyers, you are graduated to what is called the small business multi-buyer policy. But the express policy is very good only because we act as your back office for credit, and we will both pull the credit agency reports, the trade references, and do obviously the underwriting due diligence to ensure that that customer is credit worthy for the amount that you are considering for exporting. The multi-buyer policies are for the small businesses as well as larger businesses, and we do have 95% coverage as well, no deductible. Again, pay as you ship. You don't pay your premiums unless you're shipping the products overseas. And there is, depending on the exporter's export credit experience, we do allow for some buyer approval authority as discretionary credit limits that you're able to do without it coming back to us. If those amounts don't accommodate your customers, then you do need to request a special buyer credit limit, which is, it goes through our underwriting process. And lastly, the single buyer policies is specific to one buyer, either transactionally or through the course of 12 months. All the insurance policies are for a 12-month period and renewable. So once you have the policy in place, you can automatically renew on an annual basis. And all the policies do require a minimum $500 refundable deposit, which in the event that you cancel the policy, it is returned to you. Okay, risks. Oh, I went backwards. Sorry about that. So just a short mention, we do offer foreign buyer financing, and specifically under the medium-term programs, we do offer the financing of U.S. capital goods between 2 and 5 years generally. It does require at least a 15% minimum cash down payment from the buyer, which may be financed by the lender or from another source. We finance the 85% with the lender. Well, the lender finances the 85% balance, which is 100% guaranteed by us. And these are for amounts of $10 million or less, which can be done either through the export credit insurance medium-term policies assigned to the lender, or we do medium-term guarantee programs, which specific lenders have access to. So that would be an additional option in case of heavy machinery or equipment. Okay. Now it's important to look at several sources within our programs. The first one being the country limitation schedule. This is a live document on our website, and it basically spells out on a country list whether or not that country is open for business for our programs, whether it's a private sector, public sector company, and it breaks it down by short term, which is up to 1 year, medium term from 2 to 5 years, and long term, which is usually reserved more for project financing and larger transactions over $10 million. Right now, when you look at the website, it's not an X that you're going to see. You're going to see basically a yes or a no, which is very clear. You will also need to be sure that you have no notes on the country's name, under the country's name, which are conditions to meet to be eligible for those programs. And there is the link. It's easily accessible under Tools for Exporters tab when you open the EXIM.gov website. I put here a little checklist of the do's or don'ts. We do provide a lot of coverage, but it's important to note that we do have some restrictions, and that's where I'm going right now. The don'ts is we have a military restriction policy, and unless it's for humanitarian, drug interdiction, or other considerations, we do not support military or defense related sales to military overseas entities. We don't provide grants. We don't support the import of goods or services, even though our name says import. We don't support startup companies until you have at least 3 years of financial statements for the working capital programs. The lenders will not look to offer the lines of credit. So we do support companies that have at least 1 year of operations for the export credit insurance policy, and ideally that they've already started exporting on their own. Otherwise, we do recommend that you start with Jill at the SBDC so that they can set you up to get export ready. Again, we don't support anything that has nothing to do with export of US goods and services. For small businesses, we may consider some foreign content products as long as your exports of US goods is dominant. In other words, 51% of the shipment is US goods, but that's another consideration under the policy approval. And again, we don't finance exports that are restricted in the countries under the country limitation schedule. Here is my contact details. If you have any questions, feel free to either email me or call me. We can set up a call to do a one-on-one meeting. The presentation will be available to you for your review after this. If you have any questions, happy to answer them now at the end of the webinar or at another time. Thank you for your interest, and look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elena and Sandro. Incredible resources available to small businesses provided by these federal government agencies to support export. You know, the financial programs available, the export credit insurance. So many of my exporting clients feel that export credit insurance enables them to sleep at night. So they have confidence that they will get paid, as well as enable them to give terms to their customers to be competitive with, you know, their international competitors. So really tremendous resources. Both Sandro and Elena are incredibly knowledgeable about all export finance topics and are always making themselves available to companies that just really want to understand and learn more. So please use them as a resource to find out these resources that are available to you. So speaking of resources, I want to talk about next steps. So we've shared a ton of information with you today about how to find target markets, how to look for customers in those markets, market entry strategies, financing your export. So what do you do now? There's a lot of information, and I'm here to tell you that there's a lot of resources to support you in this. The Florida SBDC has international trade specialists. That's myself and Rafael here in Central Florida, to provide resources and information to help companies get educated and develop their international strategy. We provide one-on-one consulting services. Our one-on-one consulting services are at no cost. So if you have a question, you want to learn more about the export process, market research, we talked about that earlier in the presentation, how there's a number of resources available to you. We can help you with market research. Thankfully, we're part of UCF, as well as our state office has invested in a number of market research databases that we're able to share with small businesses. I like to say we are able to offer Fortune 500 market research capabilities to small businesses. If any of you know and have looked for market research reports, you know how expensive those can be. So we're happy to help support you in your market research efforts, again, at no cost. We offer international trade training like we're doing today. And then our flagship program is our export marketing plan service. So just wanted to spend a minute to tell you about that. So our export marketing plan service assists qualified manufacturers and professional service providers by providing a plan that's really a roadmap. It's a roadmap to your international growth plans. We do a very in-depth industry analysis looking at the dynamics of your industry, both domestically and internationally. What are the trends? What is the outlook? What does the competition look like? We look at indicators of demand for your product all around the world. So some of those statistics we talked about earlier. And then based on all of this information, we will then come up with a list of target markets where we think you will get the greatest return on your investment. We can also help walk you through export compliance and a number of other issues like intellectual property protection, and come up with an action plan that will include overseas opportunities and some of those matchmaking opportunities and trade shows that Rafael spoke about earlier. Here's a list of some of the program requirements for the export marketing plan service. Again, for manufacturers, professional service providers, minimum 2 years in business, minimum $500,000 in sales. So these are the requirements for export marketing plan service. If you don't meet these requirements, again, our one-on-one consulting services are available to all Florida small businesses at no cost. The export marketing plan, I've been told if, you know, in the private marketplace, it could cost $25,000 or more, which for most small businesses is just not affordable. But thanks to a grant from Enterprise Florida, the actual cost to the small business is only $500. We have a number of companies that we've assisted through the export marketing plan and have been quite successful. Recently, one of our clients just received in 2020 the Small Business Administration Exporter of the Year Award. This is an award for the entire nation, and they attribute a lot of the information that they got from the export marketing plan, enabling them to grow their business into worldwide markets. And there are more resources, and I wanted to share more with you today. So we mentioned briefly about U.S. Commercial Service. Here in Orlando, we have 2 specialists in the Orlando Export Assistance Center that I can connect you with that do things such as the matchmaking programs. They have specialists in embassies all around the world, and one of their jobs is to help U.S. companies do business in those countries. So the commercial service is a wonderful resource. Enterprise Florida has also international trade specialists in the state of Florida to support your export success. They also have a number of international trade grants that can help financially support things like matchmaking services. They have grants to support if you want to go to an international trade show. It will help support some of the booth costs of exhibiting at the trade shows. For anyone who's done trade shows know that can be quite costly. If you need an international registration grant in order to do business in a market, for example, like a CE mark, there are some grants to help support some of those costs. So 2 wonderful resources. I am happy to share more with you and connect you with those resources. Again, all to help our Florida businesses grow in international markets. There are 2 additional resources that we wanted to share with you today, and one of our resource partners, Chris Leggett, is here to join us and share with us some of these resources. First is the Central Florida International Trade Office. Chris is the program manager of the Central Florida International Trade Office. Is going to tell us some of the wonderful resources that they provide to our Central Florida businesses. And then the District Export Council. Chris is my colleague serving on the District Export Council. He is also on the executive committee as vice chair of trade policy. So with that, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Jill, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do here at the Central Florida International Trade Office. We were established in 2014 in order to help connect local businesses to the opportunities in the global marketplace. More specifically, we were established by Orange County as a tool to help businesses that might not necessarily be quite ready yet for some of the resources that Jill and others have spoken about today. I think probably a lot of you have heard talk about being export ready, and Elena talked about being unable to help startups. That's kind of where we fit into the overall service level, and so we act as a hub to all the resources that are available locally. We can offer one-on-one counseling on what's involved in getting started exporting or importing. And I'll just highlight as well that we will help businesses that need to find information about what's involved in importing. That was one of the areas that was particularly identified by Orange County when we were established, was those businesses that might need to be buying an imported component in order to make their product successful in the region, or if they might have products that are only available abroad to sell. I mean, take a look, for example, at all the businesses along I-Drive that create a lot of jobs for local residents that are selling imported souvenirs. Those are the sorts of businesses that we are also intended to help. As many of the others, we host workshops and more recently webinars about relevant trade topics and important markets. And we also help facilitate the visits of foreign business delegations to the region. More recently, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide here, we have produced a local export report, which really is groundbreaking. It provides information at the regional level, so the greater Orlando area, Lake, Osceola, Orange, and Seminole counties, as well as by the individual county. And so that's one of the services we're also able to provide, is if somebody needs to know information about trade at the county level, that's the most granular that we can get, we're able to help with that. And then maybe we can go to the next slide. Thanks. As Jill mentioned, she and I sit on the District Export Council, and Elena and Sandro are also involved with the council as part of their responsibilities at the EXIM Bank and SBA respectively. We have over 30 members that are business professionals. We've been all appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce to help support the export promotion activities of the U.S. Export Assistance Center throughout our part of the state. We're the Central North Florida deck, which effectively covers all of the state other than the south part of the state around Miami. The mentors there come from a variety of sectors and backgrounds in order to provide business counseling on the export process. No matter what the issue is that you're dealing with, you'll probably find someone on the deck who has dealt with it previously and is going to be able to talk with you about that issue from a position of experience. And as small business, many of them are small business owners themselves and entrepreneurs, and so they'll know what you're going through and be able to provide relevant advice. We also provide some outreach through trade education events and community outreach. And that was supposed to be turned off. And we can provide help to any business that you might have. So you can check us out on our website at floridaexports.org or at one@floridaexports.org is our email box. Thanks very much, Jill.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you joining us and all of our presenters. I hope you all learned something, and most importantly, learned that these resources are available to you to support your international strategy. So we have a few minutes for some questions. Christopher, have you received any questions from anyone?
Yes.
And as well as if you have some, please include it in the question box, and we are happy to address those.
Yes, yeah, please submit your questions if you have any. I do have a couple of here. I got a couple of questions, first and foremost, on whether or not the webinar is recorded. Yes, it is recorded, and it will be available after the webinar. Also another logistical question. The PowerPoint is available under the Handouts tab. It'll also be available after the webinar. A question that I have here is, how can I know if the item I intend to export will need an export license? And if so, then how can I obtain that license for exports? For context, he works in aircraft and helicopter parts.
Sure, I'm happy to address that one. So if a product requires an export license, it's really based on 4 factors. It's what is the product? What is the product going to be used for? Where is the product going to? And to whom is the product going to? So what is the product? The US government regulates certain products that are exported. So they want essentially to make sure that they are aware of any product that could have any potential of threat to the US national security. So there are certain products, just based on what the product is, that needs an export license. Where is it going to? So there are certain countries that the US government has sanctions against us exporting to. To who is it going? There are something we call lists to check. So the federal government has a list, I'm going to call them the bad guys, of entities, organizations, companies, individuals. So for every export transaction, it is up to the US exporter to make sure that those, whoever they're exporting to, is not on that list. And then what is it going to be used for? Again, keeping in mind protection of the US national security. So how do you figure that out? Well, there are different agencies within the US government that regulate all US exports. So the first question is you have to determine is which government agency covers my product. So again, that depends on what your product is. So the Bureau of Industry and Security regulates the most of US exports, but there's also the State Department that regulates products, for example, associated with defense, and that is done through ITAR. So you would need to determine, particularly in the aerospace sector, which I think this individual said they're from, would have to determine if they are subject to ITAR. If you have any questions, it's a huge topic. There are honestly webinars that go 2 days long that are covering this topic, so it's certainly not something I can answer in this Q&A session. But if you want to talk more, please do contact us, and we're happy to walk you through the process to try and figure out if I need an export license to export. But I do thank you for that question, because we didn't have time to cover that today, but it is a very important topic.
Thank you, Jill. Another question that I have here looks like it's directed towards Chris Leggett. And the question is, how much does Mr. Leggett's export report costs? I don't know if you can answer that, Chris.
Sure, it's free. If you go onto the CFITO website, It is at www.cfito.org. There'll be a link there for downloading the report. That actually will send me an email, and then I'll send you another download address. We do that just in order to keep track of who's accessing the report, not because we don't want to provide access to anybody, but it's just there to help us keep track for our sponsors so that they know that people are actually reading our reports. So that's a long way of saying it's free, but I'm happy to share that with you. Or if you reach out to me directly at my email address, I'll send you the link for that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Another question that I have here is, how can I find a lender for an international trade loan?
Sandro, do you want to answer that one?
Yes. So if you already have a business and you have a commercial bank account, my recommendation is always to go to your bank. That's where they know your business, and that's where it's recommended that you start. Talk to your business banker, even at the branch manager. You know, I'm interested in, I need financing for these purposes. Work with the SBDC to put together a loan package, and with your accountant to make sure you have the financial statements, and that's where you should start. In addition, we have, if you want to explore opportunities with other lenders, I myself, I'll be more than glad to assist you to do some introductions, but you need to make sure that you are exploring first the option with your lender. And most of the banks, I would say 99% of the banks work with SBA, and again, they will make the determination of what type of guarantee program best fits your financing needs. So, and you can always access the SBA.gov. The colleagues at the SBDC, they have relationships with different banks in the community, so they know also how to best direct you.
Awesome.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions here. One question is in regards to the export marketing plan, and asking what would be the appropriate next steps if that is something that they would be interested in pursuing.
Yes. So actually on the slide that hopefully everyone can see right now, we have the link to apply. So if you go to that link, that gives you the application if you're interested in the export marketing plan. If you want to learn more about the process, the qualifications, or just have any kind of export questions, you can contact me directly. You have my email address there, or you can also click that link for consulting.
Thank you, Jill. I have one more question here. And it reads as follows. Do I have to contract an insurance company for the boxes or items that I export? Or is that something I buy with every individual shipments? And then this is in the case a box is lost. How can I charge the end user if they were never received?
So a very specific question, which of course will depend on the situation. So whose responsibility is it if something happens to a product during shipment? So there's something called Incoterms. And again, this is another topic we couldn't cover today, but the Incoterms define who's responsible for a product as it goes from the seller to the buyer. And depending on what term you use for your contract will dictate who is responsible if something happens to the shipment. So that's number one. And then what I would encourage you to do is talk to your freight forwarder or whomever you're shipping with to get quotes and options on what the insurance would cost and cover if in fact the Incoterm dictates that you are the one responsible. Again, if you want to learn more about Incoterm, shipping, and logistics, don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Rafael, the SBDC, and we are happy to assist you in learning more about that process.
Thank you, Jill. It looks like that's all the questions we have. If anyone has any follow-up questions or would like to schedule a meeting with the consultants, please feel free to visit our website at spdcorlando.com/consultings to schedule an appointment. Again, thank you all very much for attending. Please be on the lookout for that evaluation survey, and we hope to see you soon. With that, I will end the webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.